As of today, we are only 3 days to the Japanese Grand Prix, which will take place on Sunday, the 29th day of March 2026 at Suzuka Circuit. And this race in Japan is actually round 3 or the third race of the Formula One season in 2026, which is a very exciting and interesting season, at least by the 2 races we have had so far in Australia as well as in China. And you can expect that the Japanese Grand Prix or the race weekend in Japan will equally deliver some excitement, especially given the track in Japan and how exciting the Suzuka circuit is to drivers as well as to teams. And today being a Thursday, you can at least expect to hear from the Formula One drivers as well as the team principals from various teams, given that they are going to get involved in press conferences or media activities as part of the race weekend. And so in today's video, I also want to share with you 3 things that I think you should expect from this weekend, or some of the storylines that I'm particularly interested in as I get to the Japanese Grand Prix, or as we get into the Japanese Grand Prix. If this is the first time you and I are meeting, I am Joe, and I would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. As I mentioned, we already have had 2 Formula One races so far. We had the Australian Grand Prix and also the Chinese Grand Prix, and both of those races have provided, a lot of excitement, a lot of interesting things that you can be able to talk about, and things that help us or that inform how this particular season is evolving. It has also given us an idea of where each team is in terms of performance and in terms of the gap they have or the work that they need to do to actually get in the front of the grid, or at least move forward as the season progresses. And the first thing that you should be aware of as we get into the race weekend in Japan is that Mercedes are clearly the front runners so far. Out of the 2 races we have had, Mercedes F1 team has dominated, and they have won both races. Both their drivers have won, with George Russell winning in Australia and Kimi in China. And at the same time, the team have secured a 1-2 in both weekends. And that clearly puts Mercedes ahead of everyone else so far in 2026. And in fact, they are leading in both championships. And that is one of the things that one should actually be focused on this coming weekend, because it will be interesting to see how Mercedes performs in Japan, whether they will still be as dominant as they have been, or indication now that they will continue to be a dominant team. And maybe the more interesting story coming out of this particular weekend in Japan will be which Mercedes driver is going to win on Sunday. Will it be George Russell or will it be Kimi Antonelli? And that should probably give us hope that, if these 2 can continue fighting for the Drivers' Championship, at least it gives the other drivers behind them an opportunity to be able to catch up to them, because if 2 drivers from the same team are sort of stealing points from each other, then it means no one driver will be way ahead of the others, that it will be impossible to reach them or even defeat them. And that might be something that probably the team at Ferrari, particularly Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, are watching, because they are the ones who are actually in 3rd and 4th place in the driver standing at the moment. So they may be interested in how the top 2 are going about their business, probably hoping that they do not create a very huge gap for them, such that if they get to a point where they can start winning races and probably being ahead of Mercedes, they will not have a big job on their hands when it comes to the points that the 2 are ahead of them. The second point, or the second thing that you should be aware of coming into the race weekend in Japan, is the form in which Lewis Hamilton is in at this particular point. And this is because if you compare the Lewis Hamilton of 2026 to the Lewis Hamilton of 2025, there's a great deal of difference. At least it's clear that this particular year, Lewis is in better shape, is in better form, and even his driving can reflect that. And I think when he came into the season, he was saying that he has really worked on some of the things that was affecting him last year, including his mindset. And probably that is what it has taken for him to be in this shape that he is in. At least in both races, in Australia and in China, we have gotten a lot of, racing and exciting kind of movements on track, especially when it comes to the Ferrari drivers. That is a lot of activity between Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. And in fact, in China, many people, including drivers like George Russell, were saying that they were expecting the two drivers to collide. But at least it is clear now that Leclerc and Hamilton are some or one of the best pairs on track or on the grid at the moment when it comes to wheel-to-wheel racing, because they have had two great moments in those two races where they have gone wheel-to-wheel with each other and they have maintained space. They have done it in an enjoyable, exciting, and at least respectable way where none of them has caused any kind of an issue. Of course, you don't know how things would pan out later in the year, and at least they have demonstrated that they can be able to compete wheel to wheel with each other and still maintain the gap and the respect that they each have for each other on track. And I think that's very exciting. In fact, some are arguing that the only reason why maybe these early races are exciting is because of Ferrari. They have, an advantage when it comes to the race start. And also they are keeping, fans entertained on track, especially when it comes to those battles between Hamilton and Leclerc. But clearly, Hamilton is in a better space. And he has demonstrated that throughout this particular season, at least as far as those two race weekends are concerned. And so coming into the race weekend in Japan, it will be very interesting to see how he also performs this weekend. Suzuka is a track that Hamilton loves. He has won there several times. And it would even be probably better if we can be able to win this weekend in a Ferrari. That probably would be more exciting than anything else that has happened. And at least so far, you can be able to see that Hamilton is in a good place. He seems happy, he seems excited, and as someone said, a happy Hamilton is actually a very fast Hamilton. And some have even argued that this might be the return of Lewis Hamilton, or rather, Hamilton is back. The third thing that is very important to mention when it comes to the Japanese Grand Prix is that this is the home race for Honda. And Honda has not had a very good start to the 2026 as a manufacturer, because they are the ones supplying the power unit or the engine to Aston Martin. And Aston Martin are not doing well. The team is not doing well. There are a lot of issues that are going on with them. And it seems that the relationship between, the Aston Martin and Honda is still not in a good place. And Japan being home to Honda, it will be interesting to see how things pan out. I would hope that they have been able to sort out some of the issues that they have, and probably being the race in Japan and Aston Martin being in Japan, probably they may not have an issue when it comes to parts and supply or some of the things that they need. At least we have had in the past that they did not have enough batteries, and probably that limited some of the things that they could be able to do. And I would expect that there might be a bit more pressure on Honda this particular weekend, because this is their home race. And you would expect that they wouldn't have a lot of issues, or Aston Martin should not have a lot of issues being at home. And also Honda may not want to disappoint, their supporters at home. So it is one of those things that you would be interested in observing how things pan out. But of course, we also cannot assume that everything will be okay just because this is the home race for Honda. Some of the issues and challenges that they are facing with Aston Martin are bigger or cannot be solved in one weekend. So while this is going to be a test for Honda and Aston Martin, and probably there will be a lot of eyes watching their relationship and for any signs of strain or any issue, At least it would also be good to be realistic in the sense that you do not expect everything to be smooth just because Aston Martin are racing in Japan. If they have not been able to solve some of the issues that they have, they are still going to be on the back of the grid, and probably that's not something that many in Japan, and particularly those who support Honda, would want to lead a witness. But it is what it is. But we hope that Aston Martin and Honda are going to have a better weekend than they have had so far. Over and above those three things, one of the other things that you need to be in the lookout for is how McLaren and Red Bull are going to perform this weekend. This is going to be it from me in this particular video, and I do hope that you are also looking forward to the Japanese Grand Prix on Sunday. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you have not, and I'm going to see you in my next video.